We're ready to proceed, Your Honor, in any way you would like to proceed.
All right, let's see if there's some things we can agree on. Mr. Buscemi?
Yes, Your Honor. First and foremost, Your Honor, we understand the situation and agree that Mr. Perry is in need of a bond at this point. If the court has it, we sent the court and defense counsel our proposed bond order earlier in the week. If not, I can just read what we were asking for and kind of compare it to the counter proposal sent by defense counsel in terms of, I think, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, but what we can agree to and what we can't agree, what we don't agree on. First off, the amount. We had asked for a $10,000 bond. They had asked for an OR bond. Your Honor, I'll leave that in the court's discretion. Whatever the court wants to do on that. It is a double homicide case, but I understand where we're at. So, I'll leave it to your discretion.
Let's see. Mr. Buscemi, does the court have authority to issue an OR bond on this case?
I'm not aware of any law that would prohibit it.
Okay. All right. What else?
So one condition that we both agree on is that he not violate the criminal laws of any governmental unit. Condition 1. As for condition 2, we had asked for no alcohol or illegal drugs. Opposing counsel had asked for just no illegal drugs. Whether or not he can consume alcohol, Your Honor, I'll leave in your discretion. We both agree that he be banished and have no contact with the Rising Daughter Baptist Church at 29570 US 17, Waverly, Georgia 31565. That was where the crime allegedly happened. Well, the crime did happen. And so we agree on that condition. We also agree on possess no firearms, weapons, or ammunition. Your Honor, the things we disagree on is have no contact with the victim's family directly or indirectly, in person, by phone, or through another person, or go about their residence or place of business. Your Honor, we would be asking that there be no contact between the defendant and the victim's family. And for the record, Your Honor, I should have mentioned earlier, Miss Cynthia Clayton, which is the victim's niece, is present in my office and watching this hearing, just for the record. But we would ask that there be no contact with the victim's family. We would also ask that there be no contact with any known witnesses of the GBI's pending investigation. Just because that investigation is still ongoing, we would want to minimize the risk of witness tampering in that regard. We had asked for a curfew. We'll leave that in the court's discretion. We had asked for that the defendant be banished from Brantley and Camden counties. I understand the defendant is planning to live in Camden County, so I'll leave the full banishment in your discretion. However, we would ask at the very least that the defendant be banished from the victim's family's residences, which are on Dover Bluff Road in Camden County, between Highway 17 and Highway I-95. So at the very least, we would ask for that he not go on that road in particular. And then Brantley County is where an ongoing investigation is into part of this case. But we'll leave, we would ask for that banishment as well. I think that includes all the points of agreement and points of contention. Just the last bit I will say is that if opposing counsel, just to streamline this hearing, if opposing counsel wants to proffer anything that they expect to prove via testimony, I have no objection to them proffering what they expect to show to just streamline this hearing.
Mr. Holiday.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Your Honor, I'm going to defer to Jennifer Whitfield of our team, who will handle this part for us today.
Ms. Whitfield?
Good morning, Your Honor.
Good morning.
The court has had an opportunity to read the trial transcript related to this case in which the state put forward their evidence against Mr. Perry. And the court has also had the opportunity to hear new information and evidence that has come to light since that time. But what we have not yet had the opportunity to do is to introduce you, Your Honor, to the man who is our client, Mr. Dennis Perry. And we'd like to take an opportunity to do that today.
All right.
Mr. Dennis Perry is a 58-year-old man. He is a loving husband. He's known as Papa Sunshine to his grandchildren. He has no history in his 58 years of violence. His criminal history includes 2 misdemeanor charges from when he was in his 20s. Otherwise, there is nothing, Your Honor. He is a skilled craftsman and a woodworker, as the court saw in the certificates that we provided as part of our bond motion, and as the court saw with the photographs of the woodworking that Mr. Perry has done from Coffee Correctional during his incarceration. Mr. Perry has been wrongfully imprisoned for over 20 years. He has been deprived of his freedom and locked away from his family. During his imprisonment, Mr. Perry could have, and understandably could have, become bitter, angry, or even vengeful, but he is not. Mr. Perry has chosen a different path. Mr. Perry has used his time in prison to educate himself, to deepen his faith in God, to develop his carpentry and woodworking skills, and to nourish his family connections remotely from prison. And Your Honor, even if Mr. Perry had justifiably served those 20 years for the crime for which he now bears a presumption of innocence, the fact remains that he has served his time. He poses no danger to anyone. And to the contrary, he has tremendous potential to become a valuable, supportive member of his family and community. As reflected in Exhibit D to our bond motion, Your Honor, and as provided initially to this court by the state, the Board of Pardons and Paroles has tentatively granted Mr. Perry clemency with a release date as early as September 3rd, 2020. Mr. Perry, if the availability of bond to him were contested, which it seems it is not, would bear the burden of demonstrating his roots in the community and to prove that he's not a significant risk to his community or to this court's judicial process. But if Your Honor would indulge us, even though that is not contested today, we think it's important and it informs the conditions that this court may intend to impose against Mr. Perry to explain some of those factors in a bit more detail.
As to issues that appear to be contested, you want to address those, Ms. Whitfield, at this time, or how do you wish to proceed?
We can address those, Your Honor, and I would say that the state provided its proposal in which it listed a number of terms, including banishment. In the interest of resolving this and sparing the court's time today and reaching agreement for the first time with the state, we provided a counter proposal. But Your Honor, we believe that there are no special conditions. There are no conditions of bond whatsoever that are necessary or appropriate. And so while Mr. Buscemi listed those items that we had agreed to in our counter proposal, we actually believe that there are no conditions whatsoever that are necessary here to secure the purposes of bond. And so while I could address those specific items that Mr. Buscemi mentioned, specifically contact with the victim's family, curfew, and profoundly banishment, Your Honor, from Brantley and Camden County, I can do that, but I think it's important before doing that the court understands Mr. Perry, who he is and his roots in Camden County, and why it is that he believes that, and that we believe that he is willing to return as a productive and contributing member of that community and his family.
Do you wish to present any evidence or not to consider your argument?
Your Honor, we would like to introduce you to Mr. Perry's wife, Brenda Perry, who is on our screen under the name S. Philmont, but in fact, she's right there on the screen. I don't know if the court prefers to swear her in or not, but I would like to ask her a few questions.
All right, she may go ahead.
Ms. Perry, could you please introduce yourself to the court?
My name is Brenda Perry. I am Dennis Perry's wife.
How long have you been married to Mr. Perry?
11 years.
And could you please describe for the court a bit about your relationship with Mr. Perry? how you have supported one another over the past 11 years.
In the past 11 years, I made sure that he had what he needed, and I would visit him every weekend. I visit him every weekend since 2007, and I would spend the weekends with him when he was at Archery. When he was transferred to Coffee, I go every weekend up until the pandemic. And then when the pandemic happened, we relied on the video. They had a video session that you could have a video visit. We did that. And he calls me continuously, and I would, the JPay. That's what we did mostly, is the JPay, phone calls, and the video visits since March the 11th.
And JPay is a communication device like text messaging, right?
Exactly. I could send a message. He could send me a message.
Ms. Perry, where do you live?
I live at 244 Aberdeen Road, Waverly, Georgia.
Which county is that, Ms. Perry?
Camden County.
And how long have you lived there?
In Camden County, I've lived for 62 years. At the address I'm at, there 15 years.
Ms. Perry, if the court were to release Mr. Perry, would he have a home with you?
Yes, he would.
Ms. Perry, I see that there are some individuals behind you. Could you just briefly identify who those folks are for the court?
Yes, I could. This is my mom of 86 years. This is my granddaughter, our granddaughter, Diamond Strickland. She just graduated. And then Candace Lane, which is our granddaughter. Michelle and John Lawrence, which are friends. My son, Hank Lane. And our daughter-in-law, Joyce. Our great-grandbabies, Brooklyn, Callie, Bailey, and then Cameron and Amber, our grandchildren. And we all live on the same property, 5 acres in Waverly.
Thank you, Ms. Perry. Your Honor, I would like the opportunity to address
Just 1 second. Mr. Sweeney, do you have any questions, Ms. Perry?
No, sir.
I do not, Your Honor.
All right, thank you, sir. Okay, Ms. Whitfield, go ahead.
I would like to address, Your Honor, a few of the specific conditions that the court has raised, or that the state has raised in particular. One is, and I'd like to start with the state's proposed banishment. The concept of banishment in this case.
He's not going to be banished. What's your next issue?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd also like to talk about contact with the victims. Mr. Perry has never tried to approach witnesses in this case, and there's no history suggesting that he may try to interfere in this criminal process. The community in which his family lives and in which he will return is a small community. I will tell you, Your Honor, that I'm not sure that Mr. Perry would recognize who the family members are if he were to encounter them on the street. And so, quite frankly, this condition, while I understand why it's being requested by the state, it would be nearly impossible for Mr. Perry to comply with, and there's no need to create an additional burden on his life and his movement when he poses no risk to anybody. Specifically, the route through which Mr. Bashimi asked that he be prevented from moving US 17 is the main thoroughfare in Waverly, and to prevent Mr. Perry from traveling on that road would considerably hinder his ability to get around and consider his ability to get to work and to get to those various areas of life that he'll need to support himself and his family. Your Honor, with respect to, I believe the other items, the state indicated that it would leave to the court's discretion, but if there are any specifically the court would like me to address, I would be happy to do so.
Your Honor, if I may just make one minor correction.
Yes, sir.
We were not asking for him to be banished from US 17. We were asking for him to be banished from Dover Bluff Road between US 17 and 95. Just on Dover Bluff Road between those two roads.
And is that the, where the potential the
His family lives. Yes, Judge.
Your Honor, I would need a moment to speak with my client and or his wife to understand the geography and whether that's even workable for him based on where he'd be living. This is the first, I've heard of that, and so I'm not prepared to address that with the court. But I mean, if the state wanted to provide specific addresses on Dover Bluff Road that it didn't want Mr. Perry to go onto, I can't imagine why that would be an issue. But Dover Bluff Road, like US 17, is a major thoroughfare as well, and so I would need to consult with both Mr. Perry and Mrs. Perry to understand whether how prohibitive that would be.
But she lives in Waverly.
Yes, sir.
Not in the area between 95 and 17, where Mr. Machine's talking about on Dover Bluff Road. Is that correct?
She lives in Waverly, but I'm not familiar.
All that, I think all that is the mailing address of Waverly. I need to determine whether or not she lives between Spring Bluff, as we call it, Spring Bluff and 95 on Dover Bluff Road.
Ms. Perry, can you answer that question, Brenda?
Say it again, please.
Ma'am, do you live anywhere between Spring Bluff and 95 on Dover Bluff Road there?
No, sir, I do not. Where we live, we have access to 95 down a different avenue.
Horse Stamp Church Road, that way?
Which is down Horse Stamp Church Road, which comes straight out.
Okay, all right, thank you.
We don't live there. We live out, I'm going to say from 95 even to where they're talking, well, if I live now.
Right, okay, I'm familiar with that area. All right, anything else? Ms. Whitfield.
Your Honor, I would like to note one more thing, which is I mentioned at the beginning of my remarks that the Board of Pardons and Paroles has determined that Mr. Perry is tentatively eligible for clemency as of September 3rd. That is a fact that the state has relied upon in its efforts to delay these proceedings and continue them. Effectively, some of these conditions that they're requesting amount to no more than punishment for Mr. Perry going forward with his rights and seeking a new trial today. And so we would ask that the court consider that in light of the fact that he otherwise was poised for release on September 3rd. If there are any other specific conditions that the court would like me to address, I would also be happy to do so.
On the issue of potential witnesses with ongoing GBI investigation, what is your position in that regard?
Your Honor, I am not sure how that involves Mr. Perry whatsoever. I understand that the court has an investigation into an alternative suspect who may have committed this crime, but quite frankly, that has no bearing on Mr. Perry, his life, his relationships, and the concept that it does, that he should somehow be prohibited from going into certain places, keeping an eye out for certain witnesses with whom he has no relationship, merely provides an opportunity for the state to revoke him should he happen to be in the wrong place in a small community. But there's no understandable or justifiable reason for such a restriction, because that GBI investigation has nothing to do with Mr. Perry's life that he has lived or that he will live.
Your Honor, the only thing I would, if I may, the only thing I would say about that is that the investigation is not specifically just into Erik Sparre, it's into the killings as a whole. And so there are a lot of areas where the GBI may be going. I'm not perfectly knowledgeable about where all their avenues of investigation, but it's still ongoing at this point, and we just want to protect the integrity of that investigation is all we're trying to do with that.
Anything else from the defense?
Your Honor, to the extent that Mr. Perry engaged in any behavior that concerned GBI about the integrity of their investigation, we trust that the state would bring that up with the court immediately and we'd be able to address that. But quite frankly, his behavior to date has given no indication that that's a concern or a threat. But nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. Anything else from the state, Mr. Buscemi?
Just that, specifically, that no contact with victims or the victims' families is a condition we put in every bond in every case in this circuit. And it's not an unreasonable request.
All right, the court's going to grant an OR own recognizance bond on these charges in CR 0363063. There are going to be some conditions. He shall not have any intentional contact with the victim's family. Shall be banished from the Rising Daughters Baptist Church on 29570 U.S. Highway 17. And he shall be banished from the portion of Dover Bluff Road that runs between Spring Bluff and I-95. Shall not have any intentional contact with any witness currently under the GBI investigation concerning the deaths of the Swains. Anything else from the state?
One moment, Judge, while I confer with victims.
Take your time. Go ahead. Take your time.
We're good, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Buscemi, also, I'm going to make part of all standard bonds would be he's not possessing firearms, weapons, or ammunition. So, as to defense, any issues or need for clarity?
Your Honor, one question with respect to the victim's family, and it has been a very long time, and it is not clear to me personally, and I suspect that means it's not clear to Mr. Perry either, who exactly is part of that community and who exactly the state is referring to. And so I don't know how to best address that, or maybe it's part of the intentionality requirement that the court included, and that would be fine. But if there's some process that this court typically uses to clarify matters like that, I just wanted to raise that now.
Thank you, ma'am. Buscemi, do you have any names?
And
Your Honor, they would prefer not to give a list of names just because they're still concerned about this whole case. If we can just say that if he does contact somebody and they say, hey, I'm a member of the Swain family, please stop talking to me.
So we're just intentional contact. If there's an issue, it's going to be brought back before the court, and I can deal with it.
And Your Honor, we would expect to, act in good faith.
I understand. All right. Ms. Whitfield, what else do you think needs to be addressed?
Your Honor, could I say something on behalf of Mr. Perry? Thank you, first of all. Thank you for the provision for the ruling that you've made in the OR bond. Our interest right now is, could we fashion this order that he is released directly from Coffee because of the COVID situation, because of and make arrangements to sign whatever. I think Ms. Whitfield is in Glenn County, could sign whatever needs to be signed and get an expedited release from Coffee directly.
Mr. Robbins, I have no objection to that. I just don't know what the internal policies of DOC, if they're going to allow that or not. If they're not going to allow his release at coffee, if we would reach out to Sheriff Junk, I think he may be willing to accommodate you.
And if the state can assist, just let us know.
All right.
I'm sorry, Mr. Buscemi.
I just said that if we can assist in any of that regard, just let us know.
That would be good. If an instanter release could be recited in the order, that might help with DOC.
I don't have an objection to that, but again, if there's an obstacle, if you just let the sheriff know, I think he'll.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else from anybody?
Not from the
Thank
state.
you, Your Honor.
Always good to see you. Be safe. Have a good day.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
Have a good day, Your Honor.
All right. Take care.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Yes, sir.
You have a good day.
Thank you. You too.
Yes, sir.